Hello everyone, welcome back to Code the Universe. I'm AA Web Dev and let's get started. So what do we want to do for the day? Well, for today we want to cover a bit of CSS to basically finish last week's lecture, and then we can get started with the cool stuff, which is JavaScript. So let's make our index.html file here. Alright. So I'm just gonna use this HTML snippet here from VS Code. You can get this by doing HTML:5 then tab. If you do that, it gives you a full-blown snippet instead of you having to write everything. So let's actually just do this. Let's just change the title here to Lecture 3, and in this H1 we're gonna do Welcome to Lecture 3. All right. So if we do this and just take a look at our notes. So if I do notes, okay. So the first thing we want to talk about is percentages. So percentages are a part of the width of the parent element. So what the heck does that mean? Well, that basically means that if we had two elements, okay, so let's see. Alright, let me just write up an example here. Alright, so if I see, I'm getting a couple pings on the server. Let's see if anyone has any questions. Alright, no questions so far. So let's talk about percentages. So how do they work? Well, they're basically a percentage of the width of the parent. So if we had a div here with a class of container, alright, and in this container we had an h1, and this h1 has hello world. Okay, so if we go here and add a style tag, and this style tag, let's just select the container. And then in here we're gonna give it a style. Let's give it a width of 600 pixels and a background. Maybe if I can spell background right. Background color, and let's give it a background color of aqua. And let's give the H1 a width of 50% and a background color of yellow. Yeah, maybe if I can spell yellow right. Okay, so if we do this and do Control-Shift-P and then open with live server, so if we do this, it'll open up the page that we have right here with the live server extension. So if you haven't installed the live server extension, you can do that pretty simply with Control-Shift-X and then search for live server. So if you search for live server here, you'll get the extension, and that basically lets you see the page and have it reload live, which is pretty cool. You can see the extension right here. Right. So going back to our code, so we gave this H1 a width of 50%, so it'll be 50% of its parent element. So its parent element here is the container, so it will be 50% of 600 pixels, which would be 300 pixels. Right, so if we actually take a look at the page here, as you can see, that's exactly what we're getting at the moment. So it's always half the width of its parent, so that's how that works. Now, if we go back to our code, right. So this is the first topic. I went over it a bit quickly, but it's okay. If there are any questions, we can cover it in the Q&A session. This Q&A session will be much longer, which is a great thing. All right. So next thing that we have is the CSS Position Property. So what's the CSS Position Property? So the Position Property basically lets you modify where a element on the screen would normally be. So what does that mean exactly? Well, if we go back to our code here and actually just give this h1 tag a position, so if we gave it a position of, alright, so we have a few here. Absolute, relative, so static is a default position. So if we do static and save that, and take a look at the page, as you can see, nothing really changed here. That's basically what static does. It's the normal, regular position. Then after static, we have fixed. So what does fixed do? Well, fixed puts the element on a certain position on your page and doesn't move it from that position no matter what. So how can we set that position? Well, we can set that position with the top, bottom, right, and left properties. So how do those properties work? Well, if we did top 0, actually let's just do bottom 0. And then right 0, so it'll be at the bottom right. So how do these bottom and right properties work? So you basically specify how much to push it from the bottom and how much to push it from the right. So we're pushing it 0 from the bottom and 0 from the right, so it will be at the bottom right. So if we save that, so if we save that right now, alright, let's see. So h1 position fixed. Right, let me just remove this part. So as to simplify things. So if I save that and take a look at it, as you can see, it goes right on the bottom. It goes right on the bottom right. So that's basically how the position fixed property works. Now we have a few more interesting ones. So instead of position fixed, we can have position sticky. Now position sticky is pretty hard to explain. So I'm just gonna make an example here, and you guys can probably understand what it does. I'm kind of running out of words at the moment, so let's do lorem 6000 because that's cool. Alright, so if we do 6000 lines, alright, so here's what position sticky does. It forces the element to stick. It forces the element to stick on a certain position on your page until it reaches the actual place that it's in on your code. So here it's on the bottom of all this monstrosity. So here it's on the bottom of this monstrosity of text. So it sticks to the bottom until you reach the bottom. Then it basically goes to its normal position again. As you can see, it kind of snaps back into place. So that's what position sticky does. It's a pretty interesting property, and you can use it with footers and whatnot. Just make sure that if you use it with footers, that just make sure that when you use this with footers that you don't end up, how do I say this? Yeah, that when you use this with footers that you don't end up using it on mobile, because on mobile devices you usually don't want a footer to be sticky. So that's all good. Alright, so that's one of the positions, which is sticky. Now we have a few more interesting ones. So we have, so we have relative. Now relative is pretty cool. So what does relative do? Relative basically changes the position from the default position. So what does that exactly mean? Well, your normal position is static. So relative basically lets you use the top, right, bottom, and left properties to modify the position of the element based on its regular position. So if we did right, I'm gonna do a crazy amount just for this to be obvious. So if we did right 500 pixels and saved that and took a look at it, as you can see, it's not even on the page because it's pushed from the right to the left 500 pixels. So that's basically how those properties work. They push from the right to the left. That's if you use the right property. And they push from the bottom to the top if you're using the bottom property. And they push from the left to the right if you're using the left property. It's a really nice system. So that's what position relative does. It pushes the element with the top, right, bottom, and left properties relative to its normal position. Alright, so what do we have after that? So next up we have position absolute. So position absolute is pretty similar to position fixed, except it handles the top, left, right, and bottom properties as x and y coordinates. So if we did top 500 pixels and bottom 500 pixels, the difference here between position absolute and position fixed is that position absolute changes as you scroll with the page and that kind of thing, but position fixed doesn't care about the page. It'll stay where it said it. It'll stay no matter what happens. Okay, so if we take a look, as you can see the hello world is right there at the bottom. So that's what position absolute does. They're really nice values, and they're pretty cool when you want to use them to basically move stuff around on your page. They're pretty cool to use that way. Okay, so what do we have next up after that? Changing page elements with pseudo classes and pseudo elements. Changing page elements with pseudo classes and pseudo elements. Yeah. So basically, what are these? Pseudo elements and pseudo classes are a pretty cool concept. So how do they work? They basically let you select parts of your page or select your page in a specific state so that you can modify it. So for example, if we go back to our code here, we can basically change this h1. So if we add h1 : and then here we have the pseudo classes. So what are these? So they basically allow you to modify the CSS of your page in certain cases. So let's say : hover. So if we did : hover, let's give it a background color of red. So if we gave it a background color of red, if you take a look at the page, as you can see, right now, nothing happens. But whenever I hover the mouse over it, as you can see, it gets a red background color. So that's what a pseudo class does. It lets you basically modify the class in certain positions. Now you can basically make cool stuff with this, like tooltips. If you want to try to figure out how to make tooltips, then that's a pretty nice challenge right there for you. It's a bit tough, but I'm pretty sure you can handle it. I'll do that later. And then we have some other stuff like H1. Like here we have first letter. So see those pages where you can modify the first letter of a page, where it has like a huge first letter. So this is basically what they're using. So if we gave it a font size of 6 rem, so if we gave it an insane font size like 6 rem and saved that and took a look at it, as you can see, the first letter here gets pretty massive. And when you hover the mouse over it, you change the background color. So if we take another look at our code, first one is :hover, which changes the background color on hover, and then you have colon first, and then you have double colon first letter, which changes the first letter. Also, you can change other elements when this element is hovered. So for example, if we wanted to, instead of just making the H1, if we wanted to make like the entire page background color red when we hover over the H1, we can do that by basically doing this. So if we did this, that, it looks like a regular selector, but whatever. So if we did that and hover over it, wait. Yeah, I'm probably forgetting how to do this properly, but basically something like this. Nope, that's not what I want. Right, I'm probably forgetting how you're supposed to do this, so whatever. But you can basically do that. It's a pretty cool feature. All right, so let's see what we have next up. Now I know I'm going a little too fast today, but I really don't have enough time. So next up we have the coolest. Yeah, this is probably the coolest topic that we're gonna cover today, which is Flexbox. So what's Flexbox? Well, see those? Have you ever thought about those card layouts and stuff like that and wondered how they work? Well, they're basically using Flexbox to basically make those card layouts and stuff like that. Yeah. There's this one question from Flickshot which says, so 50% means half the page. No, 50% means half the width of the parent element. So if I had like a div inside another div, if the outside div had a width of 600 pixels, and in the inside div I did width 50%, then it will be 300 pixels. It's pretty hard to explain, but you can just fiddle around with it and you will figure out how it works. It's a pretty cool concept. Now let's actually see what we have next up. Right, so next up we have Flexbox. So how can you get started with Flexbox? I'm gonna make a nice card layout. I'm gonna make a neat card layout here just to simplify stuff. So if I removed all this unnecessary style here and deleted it. Okay, so in our body, I'm gonna do a div.flex container. Alright, so I'm gonna do this, and then in here I'm gonna do div.card. I'm gonna do h1 article and then p lorem 30. Alright, so basically we're gonna copy this a couple times. So if I do that, okay, where does this card start? Okay, 3 j y p p. Okay, so if I do all these, so if we paste all those in, and save it. Right, what? Alright, my pages got a little bit messed up there. Okay, let's see if I can take back control. Alright, yeah. Okay, so as you can see, we get this nice layout over here. But what if we wanted these to be basically on the same column and to act like cards? How can we do that? Well, we can do that with Flexbox. It's a pretty nice method. So here's what you got to do. So here we have a class of flex container. So if we do display flex, so if we go here in our style and do .flex container, so if we do display flex here, So if we do display flex here and save that and take a look at it, as you can see, it instantly gets you this 3-column layout, which is basically what Flexbox is supposed to do. Okay, so let's actually make these cards look cool while we're here. Okay, so let's see, dot card. Okay, background color. You usually want cards to stand out a bit, so let's give it an RGB of 230, 230, 230, and a padding of 1M. So if we gave it a padding of 1M and a color of that and took a look at it, as you can see, we get the result that we want, but we want to add spacing between these cards. How can we add spacing between each card? Because right now they don't have any spacing between them. Well, for that we can basically use some more Flexbox properties. So here we have justify content. You can use a lot of properties. So we have space evenly, space around, and space between. Usually space evenly is the option that you want. So let's see how that looks. I always get confused between these 3 options, so let's hope that it is the option that we want. Alright, so taking a look at it, it doesn't look like it's what we want. Alright, so space evenly isn't what we want. How about space around? Yeah, so basically these put spacing around each element in your card layout. They're pretty cool to handle. Alright, so next up over here, let's say that we wanted a certain card to be twice as wide as one of the other cards. So how can we do that? So we can do .flex container. And then we can use a cool selector, one of these, but I can't quite remember what it's called. Okay, selection, grammar, marker, placeholder, slotted, spelling, mouse. Okay, it's probably not here. So if we do flex container and then actually I'm gonna make a new class here called white card. So in this class we're gonna use a cool property called flex grow. So what does flex grow do? Well, flex grow basically makes elements grow on your page. So if we actually just if we do the .card class here and give all of these a flex grow of 1, it means that their growth rate will be 1. So they'll grow at the same rate, so they'll all be the same size. But if we had a wide card class, so here .wide card, so if we had a .wide card class here and gave it a flex grow of 2, for example, then it will be twice as large as the other cards because it has double the growth rate. So if we go here and gave this the wide card class and save that and took a look at it, well we have something related to specificity here. We can handle that in a bit, but to basically fix this, I'm just gonna use an inline style. I'm gonna cover this in a minute. Okay, so flex grow 2. Alright, so if I gave this card a flex grow of 2 and took a look at it, this ain't working. Alright, let's see. Okay, so I'm gonna do ID equals special card. Okay, so I'm gonna make an ID here called special card. So if I do here special card grow of 2, so if I gave this one a flex grow of 2 and saved that and took a look at it, they're all the same size, which is interesting. Alright, so why are they doing that? Well, it's probably a good time to Google at this point, isn't it? Alright, but first let's give this a few more attempts to try to find out what the problem exactly is. Alright, so if I go to our flex container, if I give it a width of 80% and a margin of 0 auto, maybe it's the non-standard width which is a problem with it. Okay, that isn't exactly working. I'm not sure why. We can skip flex. Of Of course it wouldn't work. We had two .card classes, so we're gonna do flex grow 1. Make sure that you don't have double selectors like that, because that will really confuse your computer. So if we do flex grow of 1, these will all grow at the same rate. But if we did a flex grow of I don't know, I'm gonna give this one a flex grow of 20 just to make sure that this isn't the problem. So if I gave it a flex grow of 20 and took a look at it, right, yeah, this isn't applying for some reason. Okay. So basically that property is supposed to act like your width, but I'm not exactly sure what the problem here is. CSS is a bit weird, so that's why no one is really comfortable giving live lectures on it, because it really does tend to break a lot. So let's see, as far as questions. Right, so as far as questions on the Discord server, I'm not really seeing any. Alright, so we can come back here. So next up, if we actually take a look at this card layout, if we take a look at it, right now it looks decent. Wait, right, yeah, so right now it looks decent. But what if we were on mobile, for example? What if we were on mobile? So now they're all like on the same line still, but what if we had an even less wide screen? So what would we do? So let's say that we had a screen width that's even less than this. So if we had a screen, it doesn't wrap, it doesn't like make each article fall in its own line, which is quite problematic. So how can we fix that in particular? Well, you can fix that by using the flex wrap property. So if we go to our flex container here and give it a flex wrap. So if we gave it a flex wrap of wrap, so if we gave it this value here, yeah, my cards can actually wrap. Okay, so if we do that, as you can see, each card goes on its own line because it needs the available space. Now we can give each of these a width to basically prevent them from getting past that space. For example, min. Okay, so if we gave each of these a width, so if we gave it a width of, I don't know, 150 pixels. So if we gave it 150 pixels, simplify things. So as you can see, they all go on the same line. But what if we were on mobile, for example, and didn't have enough space? So what can we do then? Well, for mobile, and if we didn't have enough space, as you can see right now, the moment that they don't have enough space, each article just goes on its own line. So that's what flex wrap does. It's a pretty cool property, and it really helps you solve a lot of problems. Okay, so if we go back to our code here and take a look at what we have next up, we're gonna fix some of the problems that we had. Yeah, so CSS specificity. So what's CSS specificity about? CSS specificity is when you have conflicting selectors and so let's say that you had conflicting selectors. CSS specificity is how CSS handles those conflicting selectors and picks which one it's gonna select. So let's say, for example, right, let me just delete all this. Right, so wait, let me just delete all this. Oh. Okay, so yeah, alright, so if I delete all that, excess code, and in here we had an h1 with a class of heading. Alright, so let's say hello world. Okay, so if I had two styles here, for example, let's say we had an h1 style with background color of aqua and a heading style with a background color of green. So if we had these two classes, which one do you think would apply? Would it be aqua or green? Well, here's how the CSS specificity system works. Firstly, you take a look at inline styles. So what's an inline style? An inline style is when you use the attribute tag for style. So if you do style equals and then put your styles in there, those will always override everything. Then IDs. So IDs override classes, and then classes override regular element selectors. So that's basically how the specificity system works. Here I've ordered them from most important to least important here, just in case you guys want to take a look at them. But but now that you have that info, which one of these do you think will basically take precedence, the .heading class or the h1 style? Okay, let me just open that. Alright, so which of these do you think will take precedence? Well, if you take a look, as you can see, it's the heading class, because classes always take precedence over regular element selectors, and IDs always take precedence over classes, and style attributes always take precedence over all of them. So that's basically how that works. It's a really nice system to actually handle this stuff and simplify things a lot for you. So that's specificity. So that's CSS specificity covered in a really short time. So next up we have responsive design. So what's responsive design? Responsive design is when you have a site that you want to look decent, or basically that you want to have a site that doesn't look bad on mobile devices. We're not going to really take a full-blown example here, because I don't think we have enough time to basically code that up at the moment. But the first thing that you might notice here is that we have this thing on the top called a viewport. Alright, so we have meta name viewport here. So what does this meta name viewport does? Well, on regular phones, it actually just takes a look at the normal width of your device, the normal width of your website, and then it scales it down to fit the phone. So it ends up looking tiny, and it really does end up looking bad. So that's why you'll need this meta name viewport tag with this content. So let's take a look at the content. So here it says the width is equal to the device width. So what does this do? Well, this basically how do I say this? Well, this basically prevents the site from going wider than the device and then giving you horizontal scroll bars, which can be really bad. And it prevents mobile devices from basically getting a site that's wider than the screen and then just scaling it down and making everything tiny, which is also really bad. So it prevents those two things from happening. And then we have initial scale equal 1.0. This also prevents websites from being scaled down on mobile devices and whatnot. So these are basically just safety checks to prevent stuff from going really bad. Okay, so that's the first thing that we have. And then next up we have media queries. So let's say that you had a 3-card layout, and you only wanted to show 1 card at a time on mobile devices. So how can you do that? Well, you can use a media query. So what's a media query? Okay, so if we do @media only screen, right? Let me just remove this Express CSS here. All right, so @media only. So @media only screen and max width equals 600 pixels. So if we do this and open these braces here, try to focus on the syntax because it's a bit different here. Try to take a nice look at it in case you have errors, because you probably will. I always screw these up from time to time too. Anyway, so in here you basically apply styles. You basically write regular CSS in here, but this CSS will only work if your device width is less than 600 pixels. So if we did .header, .header here and gave it a background color of red, and took a look at it. So if we gave it a background color of red and saved that, as you can see, the background color here is still green. But if the device width is less than 600 pixels, so here it's 954, as you can see at the top, you can access this mobile mode on Firefox with Ctrl+Shift+M, and on Chrome you can do it through the DevTools. So if we gave it 599, so if we did 599, I probably have a typo in my media query, don't I? See, I was warning you about typos, and I already did one. Okay, media only screen and max width. Okay, @media only screen and max-width. Okay, .header. Oh, .heading, not .header. Okay, so here we're gonna do ing. So if we did .heading here and save that and took a look at it, as you can see, the background color is red because we're at 599. But if we were at if we were wider than 600 pixels, it will be green. So let's see. As you can see right now, it's 599. But if we actually move this, so if we go above 600, as you can see, it's green. Below 600, it's red. So that's basically what media queries do. You use these to basically modify layouts to fit mobile devices and stuff like that. So that's basically how media queries work. Anyway, if you enjoyed this lecture, make sure that you subscribe to the channel. We always do a lot of these lectures, and we're sure that you will enjoy them. See you guys on the next lecture.